All right. Now we're going to talk about blood vessels. Okay. So let's share screen. Okay. Slideshow. Okay, blood vessels. Okay. There are three major types of blood vessels: arteries, capillaries, and veins. Okay. And so for the most part, the blood always runs from arteries to capillaries to veins. Okay. Like I said last chapter, arteries carry blood away from the heart, veins carry blood toward the heart. Capillaries, however, are going to be important in this chapter. Okay. Capillaries are where the magic actually happens. Okay. The rest of the blood vessels are pretty much tubing. The capillaries are where the nutrient exchange and gas exchange actually occur. Okay. Okay, so the layers of blood vessels. So, okay. Let me explain this thing and I'll explain the next slide. Okay, the arteries and veins all have three tunics. Okay, three layers. Okay, okay. The capillary only has one. So the inner layer, the capillary, okay, has a tunica intima, just like the arteries and just like the veins. Okay, so from the point of view of a blood cell, you're just going through the tunica intima. And it's the same thing in the heart. The endothelium of the heart and the tunica intima is indistinguishable. Okay, so you're basically going through the same layer all the time. Okay, now the next layer is the smooth muscle layer, okay, or tunica media. Okay, tunica media. This layer is going to be thicker, a lot thicker in arteries than veins. Okay, the artery and has to expand under pressure and has to contract or relax when there's no pressure. Okay, and it also has to adjust volume of blood that's going through it. Okay, all of this makes the tunica media the thickest layer in the artery. Okay, in veins, this layer is pretty thin. Okay, the outermost layer is tunica externa or adventitia, depending on the textbook. Okay, the tunica externa, okay, is slightly thicker in the vein than in the artery. Okay, but it's definitely the thickest layer in the vein. It's the tunica media is the thickest layer in the artery. Okay, the tunica externa in the vein is thicker simply because it appears thicker because the tunica media is smaller. Okay. Okay. One last thing to know about the tunica externa. Okay, so the blood is in the middle of the tube here. Okay, so by the time you get to the tunica externa, you're too far away from the blood supply to actually get nutrients from there. Okay, so the tunica externa does something slightly different. Okay, they have little blood vessels themselves. Okay, the little blood vessels themselves are called the vasa vasorum. Vasa though means blood vessels, vasorum also blood vessels, so they're blood vessels of the blood vessels. Okay. All right, so one last thing I want to point out on this slide are these valves right here. Okay, the valves, if you remember what I told you about the heart, the valves prevent backflow. That's the same for the veins. Okay, In the arteries, you don't need to worry about backflow. There's so much pressure coming from the heart. When the heart contracts, you're resisting pressure more than you're doing anything else. The last thing you want to do is putting extra flaps. Veins, however, are different. By the time you get into veins, there's very little pressure. So you want to prevent backflow, okay? You want to force flow to only go in one direction, okay? And this is true, especially of the limbs, okay? There's more valves there. Okay, so here you can see this, okay? This also makes one more extra point that wasn't in the other side. And that's how large the hole is. The hole is also called the lumen, okay, where the light comes through, the lumen. The hole in the vein is much bigger than the hole in the artery. So these are like two things that run side by side. So one supplies the blood to a certain region, one takes away the blood from the same region. So when the artery is coming through, there's still high pressure. So you want to restrict the size of the hole. By the time you get to the vein, there's so low pressure. The last thing you want to do is tighten the hole so the blood can't get through. You want to make the hole as big as possible so you have less friction and less pressure, less resistance. Okay? So the vein will always have a larger lumen than the artery. Okay? Okay, we're going to skip the different types of arteries. Okay. Oh, actually, this picture, I want to show you what these things look like. These little things right here are the vasa vasorum. Okay, they're literally in the externa, and they supply blood to the externa and part of the media. Okay. All right. Capillaries. Capillaries are the smallest blood vessels. This is a really, really cool picture. You can see how capillaries relate to blood cells. You literally have a hole that's big enough for one blood cell to go through at a time. Okay. Okay. So the site-specific functions of capillaries. Okay. In the lungs, oxygen enters, carbon dioxide exits. In the intestines, the digested nutrients come in. In the endocrine glands, they pick up hormones. In the kidneys, they remove nitrogenous waste. And this is all important because in the next couple of slides, I will show you. Okay, the most common type of capillary is something called a continuous capillary. Okay. All right. This is the most common capillary. It's called continuous capillary. Okay. So I'm sure in biology classes and even in other classes, they tell you that blood travels in a closed circuit and stuff like that. The closed circulatory system. It's not actually true. Okay, it's slightly untrue. See these little holes right here, and these little pockets right there. Okay, the little clefts. There's a lot of leakage of fluid through those clefts. Okay, from beginning to end of the capillary bed, about 20% leak through, and some of it is reabsorbed, but about 10% of it leak out into the bed. Okay, that's how the that's how the oxygen, okay, goes from one place to another. That's how the nutrients go from one place to another. Okay, they leak, but they leak very little, and they leak only very small things. Okay. All right. Now, this picture. Okay. Let's compare this one. This is a new picture to the old picture. What do you see? okay? And what I hope you see is that this one has holes, okay? The little holes are called fenestrations, and therefore this is a fenestrated capillary. Okay, so now why do you want a bunch of holes? Well, what happens when you punch a bunch of holes in there? It's going to leak more, right? So fenestrated capillaries leak a lot of fluid, and what they leak is fluid. They can't leak big cells, so that stays in there. So what comes out is going to be clear. They can't even leak the big huge proteins. So the globulins and the globulins and the albumins stay inside the capillary here. Okay, what does leak through these little holes? Water, urea. What else leaks through here? Amino acids, sugars. Okay, all of those leak through there. Okay, anything that's small enough to fit through those holes will leak through those holes. Okay, anything that's too big will not. Okay, so where do we see this? Kidney, small intestine. Kidney, you're making urine. You need to leak fluid to make urine. So the fluid that will be eventually used to make urine is called filtrate, and they leak out of these holes here. Okay, the other place is the small intestine. In the small intestine, the exact opposite happens. Okay, you want things to leak into the blood vessel through those holes. Sugars, amino acids, fats, you want things to leak into those holes. Okay? All right, now look at this one. Take a picture of this one in your head, and now look at here. Okay, now what happened? Okay. Now you'll see a much bigger hole. This is where entire cells come in and out. Okay. One other thing I wanted to show you is how they actually look like in the body. So you just don't have a blood vessel that goes like this. You have a blood vessel that goes up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. This is a sine wave, so they're called sinusoid capillaries. Okay, so if you were imagining you were in a car and you were doing this, you wouldn't be able to drive very fast because you keep having to change directions. And that is the exact same thing for what's happened to these capillaries. It causes the blood to slow way down, and now you have very big holes where entire cells can enter and exit. Okay? All right. So now, okay, we'll get this thing right here. Okay, the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier, and we're talking about in the brain, that has complete tight junction, so there's even less stuff going through. Okay. Okay, the capillary beds. Okay, this is what a capillary bed looks like. Now, if I wanted to control the capillary bed and not allow blood through, like for example, if I took one of you guys and shoved you guys in the freezer, this would happen. Okay, so if I block these three channels right here, I can't get the blood flow on the other side, and it goes straight through. Okay, the terminal arterial. Okay, or the meta arterial. Sorry. Okay, and that way it prevents blood from doing much. Okay. All right, we'll skip the venules as well. Okay, the valves that are in veins and particular limbs prevent the backflow of blood. Okay, there's also something called a skeletal muscle pump. Okay, the veins are really thin and they're located right next to the muscles. So every time you flex those muscles, those veins get squeezed by the muscle. And since they have valves, they pump the fluid up, okay, or, for the heart, okay? Let's go like this, okay? This is especially true in your legs. Like, in your legs, you'll feel like if you sat down for a really long period of time, your legs become kind of swollen and it feels like heavy. And that's because the blood drainage to your legs, because you haven't contracted those muscles very much, are the blood is pulling there. So once you start walking, those skeletal muscles start contracting, and that helps push the blood up. Okay. The pulmonary circulation is pretty straightforward. So the only thing you have to know is the pulmonary trunk, the pulmonary arteries, and the pulmonary veins. Okay. So pulmonary trunk, pulmonary arteries, and the pulmonary veins. Okay. Okay. So the systemic arteries carry oxygenated blood away from the heart. So, okay, the aorta. Okay. So let me draw the aorta for you. Okay, so here's the aorta. Okay. The first part of the aorta. Okay, it's the ascending aorta. Okay, this thing right here is the aortic, where it turns is the aortic arch. Okay. Ascending. Aorta. This is the aortic arch. Okay. This is the descending thoracic aorta. And this is the descending. That's the diaphragm. Okay. So ascending aorta, aortic arch, descending thoracic aorta, and then descending abdominal aorta. Okay. Okay. So aorta is really big tube, so it's gonna be looking this way. Okay. The very first little branches coming off the aorta. Okay, I don't mean the coronary arteries here. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Aortic arch. Okay. This is a really interesting slide. This is where you can take the pulse of anybody. Okay. 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 the ascending aorta, the only branch is coronary arteries there. The aortic arch has 3 branches. Okay, 1, 2, 3. This is the brachiocephalic trunk. This is the left common carotid. This is the left subclavian. So let's go back to our drawing. Okay, I have 3 branches. 1, 2, 3. Okay, this first branch, it'll branch out this way and that way. That way. Okay, so this right there is the brachiocephalic trunk. This right there is the left common carotid, and this right there is the left subclavian. Okay, the brachiocephalic splits right away into the right subclavian and right common carotid. Okay, put little arrows here, little arrow there. Text, right, brachial. Cephalic, right, subclavian. Right, common carotid. Okay. And that is the left. Subclavian. Okay. So look, the arch has 3 big tubes: the brachiocephalic, okay, the left common carotid, and the left subclavian. The brachiocephalic trunk, right now is on quiz number 1, brachiocephalic, brachial, arm, cephalic, head. Okay. So now I have a right subclavian on this side, I have a left subclavian on that side. I have a right common carotid on this side, I have a left common carotid on that side. Okay. Okay. Oops. Okay. We'll talk about the division of the aorta in a little bit. Okay. We talked about the carotids. Okay. Again, there's a blood vessel list on your thing. Those are the blood vessels I want you to know. Okay. So now let's look at the common carotid. Okay, so here's the common carotid. The common carotid splits in the internal carotid and the external carotid. The internal carotid goes to your brain. The external carotid goes to your skull. Okay? So this is the common carotid. It has most of the blood going to your brain. Okay? So if I cut off the circulation of the common carotid, you die, right? If you stab in the neck and cut the common carotid, you die very quickly. If they put a chokehold on you, especially a martial arts chokehold, they are not trying to cut off your air supply. They're trying to cut off your blood supply. It's called a blood choke. And what they're doing is they're compressing the common carotid. Okay? And honestly, if they put it on correctly, you have about 5 seconds before you pass out. Okay. Okay. So you're responsible for the external and then the internal carotid. Okay. But you're not expected to know all of these guys. What you are expected to know is this circle called the circle of Willis. Okay? The circle of Willis is also known as the cerebral arterial circle. So do you see how it forms literally a circle? That way, if you cut off blood supply in one direction, you can have it compensate by the blood coming from another direction. Okay? That is anastomosis. Okay? All right, skip the trunks, intercostal, boring. Okay. So now let's talk about the subclavians. Okay, the subclavian arteries, they go to the arm and they'll go past the armpit, and when they enter the armpit area, they become the axillary. The axillaries always become the brachial arteries. Okay, the brachial artery will split in two called the radial and ulnar arteries. Okay, so brachial artery here, radial artery here, ulnar artery here, and here, okay, is the palm of your head, and you have something called a palmar arch. Okay, and coming off the palmar arch, you have the digitals. Okay, the digitals go to your fingers. Okay. All right. The abdominal aorta. Okay. We'll show the abdominal aorta. Okay. And we'll clear all this stuff. Okay. So now we'll draw the abdominal aorta. So we'll draw it bigger. Okay. Okay. Oops. Okay. The aorta will split at the end. Okay. But before that, in the abdominal, there are 3 places. Okay. 1, 2, 3, where they give off a single branch in the middle, and then 3 places where they give off tubes that come out both sides. So 1, 2. Okay. So now let's label these guys. Okay. So paired, they're called the paired arteries or the unpaired arteries. I don't know why they don't call it single arteries, but they're called the unpaired arteries. Okay. So let's go through these first. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay. This one is called the celiac trunk. Okay. The unpaired arteries supply things that are in ones. Okay. One stomach, one spleen. Okay. What? One intestine, one liver. Okay. But well, one small intestine, one large intestine, right? Okay. So celiac trunk supplies blood to the liver on one side, spleen on the other side, and the stomach in the middle. Okay, celiac trunk. The second one is called the superior mesenteric. Okay, the last one, inferior mesenteric. These two supply the mesentery or the intestines. Okay. Now I have the unpaired ones. I'm only drawing them on the left side or on the right side of the body for this guy. Okay. They're obviously on the other side as well. This first one is called the suprarenal. Okay. Sorry, suprarenal. Supra means above, renal, the kidneys. So they go to the organ above the kidneys. That is the adrenaline gland. These are the renals, they go to the kidneys. These are gonadals, they go to the gonads. So either called testicular arteries in men or ovarian arteries in females. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Okay, I will finish this in the next presentation.